Jennifer adjusted the wine glasses on the dining table, stealing a glance at the clock. Mark would be home soon, and David was already on his way. Their Friday night gatherings had become a tradition, casual dinners, laughter, and easy conversation. She loved these moments, the way their home felt warm and full. As she lit a candle, the front door opened. Mark walked in, rolling up his sleeves, his usual charm on display. "Smells amazing," he said, pressing a quick kiss to her cheek. David arrived minutes later, stepping inside like he belonged there. He always had. For years, he had been Mark's closest friend, almost family. Jennifer had known him nearly as long as she'd known her husband, and their bond had never given her reason for doubt. If anything, she appreciated his presence. David balanced Mark's intensity with an easygoing nature. He made her laugh when Mark got too serious. Dinner unfolded in the usual rhythm: stories, teasing, inside jokes only the three of them understood. Jennifer watched Mark and David exchange amused glances over some private joke, the familiarity between them effortless. She smiled. It was good, this closeness. But then something just for a second. A shift. Mark's laughter faded just a bit too quickly when David's hand brushed his while reaching for the bottle of wine. Jennifer's eyes flickered between them. David cleared his throat and refilled his glass. She brushed it off. It was nothing. The two had always been close. Still, as the night stretched on, small details stood out. Mark's knee bouncing under the table, David's eyes darting away too quickly when she caught his gaze. She shook the thought from her mind. Later, as they cleaned up, Jennifer stood beside David at the sink while Mark stepped out to take a call. She passed him a plate to dry, and when he reached for it, his fingers trembled. Just slightly. "Everything okay?" she asked lightly. David's smile was automatic but brief.
"Yeah.
"Just a long week." Mark's voice carried from the other room. Low, hurried. Jennifer turned her head toward the hallway. His voice had a clipped edge, like he was trying to keep something contained. She couldn't make out the words. David dried the last plate and set it down carefully, his movements slower than usual. When Mark reappeared, his expression was unreadable. "Work stuff," he muttered, avoiding her eyes. Jennifer let it go. Not because she believed him, but because pressing would feel unnecessary. She didn't have a reason to question him.
Not yet.
As David left and Mark lingered by the door, his shoulders tense, Jennifer felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. A question she couldn't quite form. A shift she didn't understand. She told herself she was imagining things, that their life was just as steady as it had always been. But as she lay beside Mark that night, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly, doubt stirred. It was quiet, but it was there. Jennifer adjusted the laundry basket on her hip, balancing her phone between her shoulder and ear. "No, he's just been different," she admitted to her friend Lisa.
"Distant."
"Distracted." Lisa hesitated. "You sure everything's okay? I mean, I saw Mark last week. He wasn't alone." Jennifer's grip tightened. "What do you mean?" "I was at the cafe on 5th. He was there with someone. I didn't think much of it, but it didn't seem like a work meeting." Jennifer swallowed the sudden dryness in her throat. She forced a laugh. Probably just a client, but the unease didn't fade. Mark had been working late more often, coming home exhausted, barely present. When she asked, he waved it off: deadlines, stress, meetings running over. Jennifer wanted to believe him, but the feeling in her gut wouldn't leave. That night, as Mark showered, she sat on the edge of their bed, scrolling through their credit card statements. A charge at an upscale restaurant caught her eye. She tapped on it: 2 entrees, a bottle of wine. The date stood out. The same night, he claimed to be stuck in a late meeting. She set the phone down, staring at the bathroom door. The sound of running water filled the silence. She told herself it could be innocent. A business dinner, a client, or something else. The next day, she ran into David outside a coffee shop. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said too quickly, shifting on his feet. She studied him. Normally, David was easygoing, relaxed. Today, he looked anything but. "Is Mark okay?" she pressed. David hesitated just for a second, but she caught it. The flicker of something he tried to mask.
He's fine, he said.
Work's just been a lot. A vague, empty answer. Jennifer held his gaze. Lisa saw him at a restaurant last week. With someone. David's jaw tensed. I'm sure it's not what you think. You don't even know what I think. Silence. David exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, Jen, maybe you should just talk to him. She narrowed her eyes. Why do I feel like you already know what's going on? David glanced away. It's not my place. Frustration flared in her chest. Not your place? You're his best friend. If something's wrong, I deserve to know. David clenched his jaw, visibly torn. Then he did something that made her stomach drop. He looked guilty. She didn't say another word, just turned and walked away. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, mind racing. Something was wrong, and David knew exactly what it was. Jennifer sat in the dim glow of the living room, her heart pounding as she scrolled through Mark's recent messages. She had never invaded his privacy before, but something inside her snapped the moment she walked through the door and saw him stiffen at the sight of her. His phone was left unattended on the counter, screen still glowing. One message stood out. David, we need to talk. She's starting to suspect something. Her breath caught. She clicked the thread. Messages stretched back weeks, some vague, some unmistakably intimate. I hate lying to her. We can't keep doing this. What if she finds out? The floor felt unsteady beneath her feet. Mark walked in, stopping short at the sight of her holding his phone. His face paled. Jennifer. Don't. She cut him off, voice shaking. Just tell me the truth. Silence. His jaw clenched, fingers twitching at his sides. She forced herself to breathe. It's David, isn't it? His eyes flickered with something: shock, guilt, relief, all at once. That was the only confirmation she needed. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. How long? Mark exhaled, running a hand through his hair. A year. Jennifer let out a hollow laugh.
A year?
You've been lying to me for a year? Mark stepped closer. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, she shot back. And David, your best friend, my friend. How could you both do this? Mark's shoulders sagged. I didn't know how to tell you. I tried to ignore it, to push it down, but he stopped, swallowing hard. I love him, Jen. The words sliced through her. Not just the betrayal, but the weight of what he had kept buried for so long. She had spent years building a life with him, believing she knew him. And now, in a single moment, everything unraveled. Jennifer pressed a hand to her temple, trying to steady herself. And what was I, Mark? A cover? A convenience while you figured yourself out? No, he said quickly. I loved you. He stopped himself, shaking his head. But it's different. It's always been different. She let out a shuddering breath, staring at the man she thought she knew. You should have told me the truth. Mark looked at her, pain etched across his face. I was afraid. Of losing you. Of admitting it to myself. Jennifer blinked away, the sting in her eyes. Well, now you have. The weight of the moment settled between them. The life they had built, the trust they had shared, it was already gone.
Nothing he said could change that.
Without another word, she turned, stepping away from the man who had broken her in a way she never saw coming. Jennifer packed the last of her things in silence, her movements deliberate. There was no screaming, no dramatic confrontation, just the quiet acceptance that everything she thought she had was over. Mark stood near the doorway, watching her. I don't want this to be how it ends. She zipped her suitcase. You made that choice for both of us. He exhaled, running a hand over his face. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, she said, turning to face him. Not just because you cheated, but because you lied. Because you let me believe in a future that never really existed. Mark swallowed hard. I was scared. Jennifer studied him for a long moment. She saw the man she had once loved, the man she had trusted with every piece of her heart. But now, all she saw was someone she no longer recognized. David, she said finally. Does he know you're here begging me to stay? Mark's face tightened. It's not like that. She let out a humorless laugh.
Then what is it like?
You love him. You chose him. But you still want to keep me here, too? He didn't answer, and that told her everything. She grabbed her suitcase and moved past him, the finality of her decision sinking in. Mark didn't try to stop her this time. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. She had spent days drowning in grief, questioning everything. But now, standing on the edge of a new beginning, something shifted. She wasn't broken. She wasn't weak. She was free. The realization settled deep in her chest. This pain, this betrayal, it wasn't the end of her story.
It was just the end of a chapter.
As she walked away, she let go of the life she thought she wanted and embraced the unknown. Because sometimes, losing everything was the only way to find yourself again.